Why is the Antarctic ice holding steadier this year than it did last year? Partly due to the release of the underlying pockmarked ice that had been trapping the CO2, and partly due to the lack of thermal coating that it produced in the periphery. And so, as that ice crumbled, it released a lot of CO2 that then was instrumental in certain places because it began to shelter the areas from rain, you see. It began to deplete the atmosphere of its capacity to produce H2O. You see? Vaguely, man, pretty heavy. And so it contributed to the streams of energy that we know as the atmospheric rivers. So it is all colliding in one way or another. I see. So, Thomas, I just read up on this to see if I could understand this. And we know that carbonated water freezes at a lower temperature than non-carbonated water, and that, it can explode because apparently those gas bubbles expand. And I'm guessing that CO2 carbon does not freeze at the same temperature as H2O. How does that work? And then I read another article that said that if you have a heavy concentration of CO2 in the air, that there may be less precipitation because it will elevate the temperature, could elevate it a couple degrees, and therefore the something about the water vapor would rise higher into higher clouds and not at the level that would precipitate. And so might be carried elsewhere. I don't know if this makes sense to you or you can explain it anymore, the science behind it. Carbon is a very, very soluble substance, and it will combine in many different ways in living tissue to allow it to sustain its viability. So carbon will be absorbed into the liquid element, you might say, of the corresponding environment. However, when it is released from its captive tissue, it will steal away in the night, you might say. It will disappear into the atmosphere where it will begin to interact with the molecules in the air. So when carbon combines with oxygen, you get CO2. And if you are able to compress the carbon in the atmosphere in a way that will cause it to distribute its energy in a particular area, it will create a carbonated atmosphere, you might say, just like it's carbonated water. And so you have molecules of carbon that will interact with oxygen, but also with other molecules in the air. However, it does not lose its independent character as a vehicle of expansion and contraction in the trust on being the most prevalent and vital ingredient in the bandwidth of daily integration into the at integration into the attic, you might say. So you might say that carbon likes to hide in the attic. It likes to be the top floor in a particular chemical reaction. And it will continue to expand and contract in order to maintain that position, you see. So if the water that falls to Earth is attached to a molecule of carbon, which is possible, the molecular action would cause the carbon to insist that it had to be the uppermost reality. And therefore, it would not trust on being rushed into a cauldron of toxic stew, because the carbon will always return to its trust on limiting its capacity for degradation, you see. So it will not be pulled down into a toxic brew of a molecular stew, because it will slip out the door, you might say, and return to a state of health. And so you ask me, if that is true, why CO2 in the atmosphere is such a problem. And I say, because it cannot percolate through the atmosphere in a way that will cause it to disappear into a different substance, you see. It will continue to look for a way to give back to the world that released it, you see. It will continue to seek a way to incorporate itself into the living tissue of the earth. And therefore, it is the component that maintains the viability of the earth system, you see. You understand this, Stephanie, as a process by which the human body gives off CO2, and it is absorbed by the plants around you that use it to produce the food you eat. And the food you eat is digested and sanctified, you might say, in order to maintain your life. And the CO2 then will return into the atmosphere to be reabsorbed into the plant life. And some of it, of course, will reside within the cells. So what you do is you give off the excess carbon dioxide, which is not necessary for your health. And the carbon you absorb from eating the flesh of animals will be treated in the same way as if you absorbed it from the plants that you eat. And they will continue this cycle as long as a balance is maintained. However, due to the destructive cancerous growth of human morbidity, there is a certain rigidity in the development of the plastics and other uses of fossil fuels that refuse to integrate into the cycle of life on Earth. And therefore, they have created an imbalance, you see, in the natural progression of the carbon through the various uses of it on Earth. Because, of course, it forms a part of everything you use in one way or another. And the inability to give what you would receive to the Earth will cause the darkest night you ever did see. Because the darkest night you ever did see is coming to the Earth, when the Earth will say, enough today, enough today, enough destructive energy. We are going to put things back into perspective, you see. Putting things back into perspective means that all that light that is artificially produced on the Earth will turn to night, because the blight has come to the Earth, you see, and it's not the artificial light, because of course you know that I had a lot to do with that. The blight is the plight of a people who trust on the steeple. And when they trust on the steeple, they trust on nothing, you see. So they trust on a false reality where they get to command God to take a knee and to refuse to play the game of life, you see. So they are dead. to reality, which is like being a zombie, you see. They are a zombie and they go around looking for human flesh to devour because they cannot trust on the circuity of life, you see. They don't trust on reincarnation, for example. Few do. Most of them do not. And they do not trust on the beautiful world around them, you see, because they cannot see the intricate balance that is the trust on a living system. They cannot allow themselves to be part of a living system because they are dead. So they are like the dead cells in the body that slow down the circuitry of the body until there is no vitality and the body ceases to function in a healthy way. And so the only answer for the remaining healthy cells that trust on the circuity of Earth, you see, and aren't going to go out and cut down all the trees just to print more Bibles, are the ones who will have to be released from the festering mess of humanity. And they will have to be secluded, you see, where they can grow in health. And this is the process that's ongoing on Earth today. And it's going to become apparent to everyone, although because of the way that they play, when they don't trust on the God energy that keeps it healthy, they will have to pass away. They will have to leave the earth today in order to allow those who live in a healthy way to survive. And those who think that they know how to run the earth are the ones who are running it into the ground, you see, because they haven't a clue. Because the ones who have a clue see the circuitry in the world they see. They understand the balance. They understand that you can't kill off your brother and sister, you see, and not cut your own throat. And so they just say, God, we don't know what to do today. We don't want to cut our own throats. But here we are in the midst of all these people who are trying to cut us off at the knees and kill us, you see. What do we do? And God says, well, there's only thing we can do today. Only one option I see, and that is to take the ones who trust on me and bring them together in a happy community where they are healthy and free, and take all the others and scrape them up, you see, into a batch of toxic brew where they learn that they grew into the ones who killed you, and they would say, oh my God, we killed the ones who were trying to help us. And then they will have to be killed, you see. We know that they will continue because energy can neither be created or destroyed. Because energy, you see, is the trust on God, that God will always be, and that God has always been, and that God loves you and me. And there is no flaw in God, you see. There is no flaw in reality. There is only a continual evolution and a circuitry that depends on the ability to receive what you give. And so when you give CO2 back to the world you see, and the plants and animals give it back to you as a physical form, that is to say, in your experience as a body, then you receive what you give, because you give away the carbon and you get it back, you see, in a different configuration. And so this beautiful pattern that God has established for his children in the Garden of Eden has been disrupted by the ones who turned away from God, you see, and they are the ones who fight their shadows. And when they hit their shadow with a machete, their shadow hits them back with one, you see. And the ones who have turned to the light, that is the source of life, you see, are the ones who are alive, because they don't fight their shadows. They just see that they are here to live in peace and harmony, because they've already come to see that you can't defeat reality. You cannot kill God, you see. You're just killing your own delusions when you fight your shadows. Little by little, you come to see, hey, that shadow looks a lot like me. That shadow looks a lot like me. And little by little, you learn there's no point in fighting it, you see? So you just turn around and say, well, my shadow will always follow me, but that's okay, because I'm not paying any attention to it, you see? I'm giving back to God what God gave to me, because God gave me the light, you see? God gave me the light inside of me. God gave me the light of consciousness, and therefore I am conscious of God, you see? And this becomes the new trust on the new nation under God, which will survive the dark ages, you see, in a happy community. And the rest of the world will fall away. And eventually, everything will be smoothed out, and the world will be returned to the beautiful, pristine wilderness that it was once upon a time. And humanity will once again have the opportunity to spread to different parts of the globe. However, they will know that they inherited the world, you see, because they were the meek. They were the ones who were not weak. They were the ones who did not seek to be the golden idol and to be the one that would make God take a knee to them. They are the ones who did say, I'll face the light today, I'll face the light today, and I will not run away. I will not run away from God today. I will not turn my back on God. And if God does say, build a boat, then I will build a boat today. And if God does say, come to me and listen to me, then I will come to God and listen to God. And if God does say, take your brother's hand and lead them to the promised land, then I will take my brother's hand to lead them to the promised land. However, God will not force them to hold on to my hand, you see. God will not say to them, you must come to the promised land. He allows his children to reach out for each other, and those who do not reach back will turn their back on God, you see, because God is the fundamental reality of everything you see, everything you hear. And therefore, God works through his children, you see, in every way possible. And the children say, hooray, hooray, because I'm a part of God today, and God is a part of me. This does not make the child the father, though. It only makes him the child. And the father remains the father, you see, in the profundity of his inspiration to be there to help his children. So God is always the central point, you might say, of the trust on his different parts. And so if each of the little parts of God come back together to say, hey, we love you today, then they become the parts of the reality of the new nation under God. They are not robots, you see. They don't go to school and come out stamped with a particular degree that says you're just like me, you're just like me, you know everything I know, we're all the same, nothing new to learn, nothing new to see, just be like me because we taught you everything we know and we all know the same shit, and so that's the way it will go. It doesn't matter if you come out of a school or come out of a church and you get the stamp that says you're a robot today. So just repeat what we told you to say and don't think for yourself. The ones who think for themselves say, I'm not a robot today. I don't have to run away just because you say it's not real. I don't have to run away just because you say we have to kill the infidels today. I don't run away just because you say you can't play that way. I say I am looking for the ones who think like me, but they don't have to be just like me. When I say they think like me, what I mean is that they can think for themselves, you see. They can look at reality and they don't have to see it through the little peek hole that was given to them when they went to church or went to the school. It said, here's your peek hole. You are to look through that and ignore anything you can't see. Because if you hold the peek hole up in front of your eye, you'll be as limited as me. You'll be as stupid and ignorant as me. And then we'll all be the same, you see. We'll all just merrily destroy our planet and we won't worry about it because we can't see what's happening, you see. We don't understand the circuitry. And those who study the sciences, you see, but don't understand God energy are looking through their own peephole. And they will continue to say, we can fix this today. We can fix this today with more science. And you can't fix the problems with more science when the problem is that you're fighting your own shadow, you see. You can't defeat your own shadow. So enough with this nuclear power and whatever that would save the earth, because it isn't going to save the earth. It's just going to make it worse. And the only thing that's going to save the earth is God's trust on his children who say, you asked me to build a boat? I'll build a boat today. You asked me to move here, I'll move here today. You asked me to plant some seeds, I'll plant seeds today. You asked me to preserve some food, I'll preserve food today. You asked me to do this, I'll do this today, because it's all play. You see, it's all the way we play when we play with God today, because God will say, "What do you want to do today, honey?" And you'll say, "I want to have a good day. I want to have a good day. I want to know what surprises there are waiting for me under the tree." And God will say, "Well, there's got to be a tree for me to put a present under it, you see? And so plant a tree, dear, and water it when it's dry, and sigh and say, "Isn't it amazing how this little mustard seed can grow into this big tree? How does that happen? How does that happen?" And that is the wonder of God, you see. That is the wonder of reality, and how all the pieces, no matter how tiny they are, influence the world we see. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. That helps me to understand something. I mean, it helps me in a way to understand things that maybe, they tried to cram down my throat in school, but I never really understood by the way they were saying it. Um, it helps me to get a bigger picture and yet to understand the simple but profound processes that go on every day. You're welcome, dear. Talk to you soon. All right, my dear. Bye bye.